Hey everyone, and welcome to this first episode of our Django series. Today, we're going to build a solid foundation for your web app, structured both for development and ready to be deployed on Heroku and Amazon S3. Whether you're building an API or a full stack app, this setup is clean, scalable, and production ready. Step 1. Let's set up our project folder structure. So for this tutorial today, I am using Visual Code inside MacBook, but feel free to use whatever code editor you want. Let's go into our files and open our folder. Now on our local folder, let's create a project file. You can call it whatever you want. For myself, I'm going to call it Django tutorial. And then we're going to open that folder, and we see in our File Explorer inside our Visual Studio, we have our project file. Now inside our project file, we need to create another folder that we're going to name Backend, and that will host all of the codes and files pertaining to our Django app. To do so, we're going to go on top right here, and in Terminal, we're going to select New Terminal. Now that our terminal is open, we're going to type in MK for make dir directory, and now we're going to name our directory that we're going to call it Backend. Again, you can call it whatever you want, but I always follow the same file structure to make things streamlined and minimizing the errors. And now we press enter. Backend is created. Now that our backend folder is created, we need to navigate from our project folder into our backend folder, and to do so inside our terminal, we got to type in cd for change directory, then backend, enter, and now we've navigated inside our backend folder. Step 2. We need to create a virtual environment that's going to host all the codes and dependency pertaining to our app, therefore eliminating the chance of collision with another app if we had installed our dependency locally. And to do so, very simple, we're going to type in python-m venv for triggering the virtual environment script, and then we're going to name our virtual environment, and for myself, I always name it venv for the same reason, to keep everything in the same format. So now if we look into our backend folder, we've created a virtual environment folder that contains all the files to run our virtual environment. Now we're going to need to activate that virtual environment, and to do so, we're going to type in on Mac source space name of your virtual environment. Myself is venv. Then we want to navigate into the bin folder and then trigger the activate script. So venv /bin/activate. Enter. And now we see in our terminal on the left hand side, our virtual environment has been activated. What that means is essentially anytime we're going to install a dependency inside within our terminal, we're going to install it inside our virtual environment. So the first dependency that we need to install is going to be our Django framework. So we're going to type in python-3-m pip install and then Django. And for this tutorial, we're going to select the version 5.0.6 as a known and tested stable version. And then we press enter. And now we see inside our virtual environment, the dependency for Django admin has been installed, right? Our framework has been installed. And now we have a few more that we need to install, but we don't need to install them one by one. Now we can inline all of the dependencies that we need for our project. And don't worry, after this section right here, after we have installed them, I'll explain to you everything that they do. So the next one is going to be Django extension. And then we need to install Django on Heroku. Next, we need to install Gunicorn or Gunicorn, and then python.env. And again, I'll explain everything in just a minute. Next one will be python-decouple, and then Django Heroku. And then again, Django storages, and lastly, Bodo 3. Okay, so we see that we have a mistake here in Django extension. Let's go fix that. If not, it's going to throw an error. So Django extension on Heroku, Gunicorn.env, decouple, Heroku, storage, and Bodo 3. We press enter, and if everything goes well, they're going to get all installed without any error. And then we see again in our virtual environment, we have installed all of those dependencies. And now, what dependency did we install? The first one is Django, right? This is the core framework of which we're going to be working with. And then Django extension, you'll see down the road, those are development tools. Django on Heroku, and Django Heroku is for the Heroku server integration, and which we're going to be used for production. And then Gunicorn or Gunicorn is the same thing for Heroku, a production WSGI server. .env and decouple is for setting up our, and then storage and Bodo 3 is for Amazon S3 integration, right? So very straightforward. Step 4, let's start a Django project. To do so, it is very simple. You go in Django-admin, start project, and then name your project. For myself, I always name my project inside my Django app, config, and then space dot, essentially letting it know that we want to install the project file locally inside our backend folder without creating another folder. Enter. And now we see that inside our backend folder, we have our config file, our virtual environment, and our manage.py file. So essentially right now we have a functioning app, and to test that, we go in Python 3, manage.py, and then we run the server, right? And then we see we have a running server. We visit the local address. It lets us know that we have a functioning app. But to be able to set it up now for our local development and our production server, we need to tweak our app a little bit. So to do so, the first thing is we go into our config folder and we create a new folder. We're going to call it settings. And this file, you guessed it, this folder, you guessed it, will host all of our setting files. So we're going to move our settings.py and start our setting files. So we move. There you go. Now that being done, inside our setting folder, we're going to create a file to integrate that folder inside our project. And to do so, we're going to type in __init___.py. And that, as I said, integrates our setting folder inside our project. Now we're going to be creating our development and production environment or files structure for those purposes. So inside our settings, we're going to create 3 files. The first one is going to be dev, and you guessed it right, for development purposes. And then after, we're going to create another one. We're going to call it prod, and yes, for production purposes. And lastly, we're going to create a base file that's going to hold both the development and production. And now we're going to create a base file that's going to hold all the codes that both work on the production and development environment. There you go. So now that those have been created, we're going to be importing some code, essentially the ones that you find in settings.py, right? But like any good coder, over time you will have a library of code snippet to make your work go faster. So for dev, I'm going to import, if we go right here for this tutorial, for our dev file, we're going to import the dev code. For production, same thing. For base, the same. Now, don't worry, I'm going to be sharing with you those files so you can import them into your code and hopefully create yourself your code library or your snippet library. Let's save all of these files. There you go. And now we need to make just a little change, right? In settings right here, because essentially what we've done, if we look at settings files right here, right, with the installed app, the middleware, the templates, the database, and whatnot, we have the same thing in base. Production, that's for the production, and then in dev we have the same files required for dev. So now we go into our settings files, and then we just copy right here our secret variable, and we go into dev, and then we paste right here our secret. This is the password that access our database. We make sure that our debug setting is set to true, and then we allow all the hosts to connect to our app while we're in development settings. Obviously, when we're production, we're going to change that, right? So we save everything, and then the last step that we need to do is we need to let the app know where to find our development settings. So to do so, right, we go into our config folder, and firstly we'll select the asgi.py file, and then we'll point it to our dev file. We'll do the same thing in the WSGI. We'll point it to dev, and then we'll go to our manage.py and we'll point it to dev as well. And now we've done all the changes that we needed to do. And now to test our app, same thing, Python 3, manage.py, run server. And if everything goes well, we see it's running without any errors. We visit the local address, everything is working fine, and then we can delete our settings files. There you go. We can delete our settings files and see that we still don't have any error, essentially letting us know that everything is working well. So I hope this video was very helpful. Your Django backend is now ready for both development and production environment. And on the next video, we're going to be setting up our AWS S3 or Amazon S3 storage and our Heroku deployment. Until then, like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments any question you may have or what I can improve. Until then, take care and bye-bye.